coming up on the show today, we're going to be talking about the haunted history of the most haunted cemeteries of Savannah, Georgia. We're going to talk about the ghosts of St. Roch Cemetery. We're going to look at the top 32 most haunted places of America. We're going to take a look at the 12 most haunted places of Virginia. Talk about some of the top haunted hospitals and asylums from around the world. We're going to dive into some of the history of the hauntings behind the Central State Hospital located in Petersburg, Virginia. And then we're going to take a look at some of the most haunted ghost stories from haunted schools. Mysteries of the Paranormal Podcast Season 3 Episode 2 is coming at you right now. Alright, welcome back, guys. Welcome back to the podcast. As you can tell, today is the first ever live stream under the new name. We're going to be up from now on. Restless Souls Paranormal. So it's going to be a long podcast because we have a lot to talk about. But that's okay because it's the first podcast under the new channel name. So we need to make it a special one, and we're gonna do exactly that. So starting off, we are 3 weeks away from Lake Shawnee. 3 weeks away. It is coming very soon. And speaking of investigations, I found a new spot. It's in Glade Springs, Virginia. We're going to try to check that out one day. It's the Nickerson Sneed Haunted Mansion. They do overnight investigations. So we will be checking that place out. If not the end of this year, next year for sure. But we are ready to go for Lake Shawnee. Needless to say, we're still 3 weeks out and I already have my bag packed ready to go. But, and then, as for the investigations, and then this Saturday, I'm going to be doing a live doll investigation right here on the channel, Saturday night at 10 p.m. Eastern. We're going to be investigating my clown doll that I have, because I have been getting some more activity out of it. So I think it's the right time to do another investigation on him to see what he's got to say and if he will give us any activity. So we're going to be doing that Saturday night and possibly Sunday if this rain decides to go away. We're hoping to maybe go out and film a couple videos Sunday afternoon and Sunday night at some places we haven't been to before. So I'm hoping we can be able to do that as long as the weather clears up, because it's been nasty the past couple of days. But other than that, we're going to go ahead and jump right on in to the topics for tonight. The first topic we're going to be talking about is the most haunted hospitals and asylums from around the world. Starting off with number 1. Is the Royal Hope Hospital located in Florida, USA. First on the list is a haunted hospital located in Florida. Known to many by its gruesome history, Royal Hope Hospital was a Spanish military hospital from 1784 to 1821. And was eventually demolished through time. Finally, a replica of the original hospital was built to house the victims during the Seminole War. However, when the city workers were about to repair the water lines and penetrated the area of the old building, they found out that the hospital was originally built on what appeared to be an ancient Native American burial ground. Visitors of the Spanish Military Hospital Museum would often mention qualities of groans and shouts coming from unoccupied rooms, adding up to real ill bids moving over the place, beverage jars sliding, and the frequent sounds of marching feet in an unfilled upstairs region. Frequently, encounters of strange events and apparition sightings were told and are still being experienced by the guests to this day. Number 12 is a Tranquil Sanatorium in Canada. The Tranquil Sanatorium was built in 1907 as a ranch before the owners began caring for tuberculosis patients. A small community known as the Tranquil was built around it. The community has its beautiful gardens, houses, a farm, a fire department, and even more facilities. In 1958, the hospital closed and was reopened in 1959 to treat the mentally ill. It then closed permanently in 1983. The years of isolation and sadness seem to have been absorbed into the surroundings, and on occasion, the emotions can be felt by the living, and haunting encounters will occur. Strange floating orbs throughout the facility have been seen. Feelings of sadness, uneasiness, and dramatic temperature changes still invade the hospital. There have also been stories about mysterious voices and ghostly figures, one of which is that of a nurse who was brutally murdered by a patient. Number 11 is the Severals Hospital in England. The hospital, located in Colchester, Essex, United Kingdom, was a psychiatric Yeah, whatever. I can't talk tonight. Sorry. But it was built in 1910 to the design of architect Frank Whitmore. It opened in May 1913 and housed over 2,000 patients. Most of the buildings are in the Queen Anne style with few architectural embellishments typical of the Edwardian period. The most ornate buildings are the Administration Building, the Lark House, and the Severals House. The reputation for it being extremely haunted should not come as a surprise. The hospital closed in the early 1990s following the closure of other mental institutions. However, a small section remained open until March of 1997 for the treatment of elderly patients suffering from the effects of severe stroke. Number 10 is the Whittingham Hospital in Lancashire, England. It opened in 1873 as the Lancashire County Asylum and grew to be one of the largest mental hospitals in Britain. However, in 1967, the hospital faced a controversy involving complaints of mistreatment in 2 male and 2 female wards in the St. Luke's division. Complaints were reported such as patients being locked in small rooms under staircases and washrooms and outside in the airing courts regardless of the weather. Other include patients being dragged by their hair, a wet towel treatment, nurses setting fire to a patient's clothing, beatings, and vermin infestations. After an investigation took place and a result, both the head male nurse and the matron took early retirement. 2 male nurses were convicted of theft in a separate incident. Another nurse was jailed for manslaughter after an elderly patient he assaulted later died. Alright, and the last one, the Old Changi Hospital in Singapore. It was previously known as the Royal Air Force Hospital and was merged and renamed as the Changi General Hospital. After it was closed in 1997, it sat abandoned for over a decade. Regarded as one of the most haunted places in Singapore, the hospital was captured by the Japanese forces during World War II and was used as a healthcare facility for the prisoners of war detained at the military base nearby. The next topic we're going to be talking about is the 12 most haunted sites in Virginia. Number 1, located in Alexandria, Virginia, is the Gatsby's Tavern Museum. Originally built as a tavern and inn for weary travelers to rest, the museum is the site of one of the most curious mysteries in Virginia history. In 1816, a young woman traveled to Alexandria on a ship with her husband, contracting a disease on her journey that led them to seek rest and at the inn. However, once brought to Gatsby's, her health quickly deteriorated, and on her deathbed, she made all of the people that attended to her swear an oath to never reveal her identity. To this day, no one knows who she was, and she is buried in St. Paul's Cemetery with a gravestone marked Female Stranger. Both the cemetery located near Duke Street and room 8 of the tavern are supposedly haunted by the ghost of the young woman. Number 2 is the Battleship Wisconsin in Norfolk. One of the largest battleships to have been built by the U.S. Navy is the battleship Wisconsin, which looms over downtown Norfolk's Waterside Drive. You can hear all about the stories of former military servicemen and the ghosts that are said to now roam the ship. The museum even hosts overnight investigations. I'm going to have to look into that. Number 3 is the Stonewall Jackson Memorial Cemetery, located in Lexington, Virginia. Stonewall Jackson Memorial Cemetery, where, of course, the famous Confederate general was laid to rest. But the cemetery is haunted, as people say they have swear to have seen Jackson and fellow Confederate General Robert E. Lee on his horse Traveler as they wandered down the now unfamiliar streets of Lexington. The next one is located in Abington, Virginia. It's the Martha Hotel and Spa. The building served as a hospital for wounded soldiers from both sides during the Civil War, and many unfortunately never left the hospital to return home. The Martha is said to be haunted by a few of these phantoms, apparently unfinished with the world of the living. The next one is another place I want to check out. It's the Hollywood Cemetery in Richmond, Virginia. The landmark's deceased residents include over 18,000 Confederate soldiers, 2 U.S. presidents, and the President of the Confederacy, Jefferson Davis, along with 25 Civil War generals. And inside the tomb dwells the Richmond vampire. But in addition to all these important memorials, you'll come across a large cast iron Newfoundland dog marking one small grave in the cemetery. The statue stands guard over the grave, holding the remains of a young girl who tragically died in 1862. Another strange sight within the cemetery is the tomb marked W.W. Poole, which, according to locals, is considered the Richmond vampire who dwells inside the tomb. The local legends have Richmond residents believing that those buried in Hollywood Cemetery may not be resting in peace, but instead roaming the grounds at night, looking to prey on unsuspecting visitors. The next one I have personally been to. We went last year. The Exchange Hotel and Civil War Museum in Gordonsville. The Exchange Hotel was built in 1860 beside an important railroad junction, offering passengers worn out from long trips a place to rest. Unfortunately, 2 years later, the Civil War came to the region, and the hotel had to be converted into a receiving hospital. In less than a year, over 23,000 sick and wounded soldiers were brought to the Exchange Hotel, and by the time the war ended, the number had increased to over 70,000. Over 700 people were buried on the grounds during the war. It now functions as a Civil War museum with artifacts, uniforms, and firearms on display, but you may hear the faint moans and cries from soldiers that never left the premises. When we was there, we did catch a soldier on EVP in Spirit Box. We caught a woman upstairs and a young girl upstairs as well. That was a cool place. The next one is the Sailors Creek Battlefield Historic State Park. Many of the places mentioned on this list had links to the Civil War, but few are as significant as Sailors Creek Battlefield State Park, where the last 72 hours of the war were fought. The battle was bloody, with nearly a quarter of Robert E. Lee's army either killed, captured, or wounded. In need of a makeshift hospital, the Confederates used the Overton Hillsman farmhouse on the property, with the battle raging literally in the backyard. Bloodstains still mark the floors of the house, and countless soldiers were buried in mass, unmarked graves all over the property. The next one is the Bracy General Store. The store originally opened in 1900, which brought locals in for all sorts of good and household items, even carrying coffins for the unfortunate occasions in which families would need them. In addition to the residents looking to stock up on home supplies, the general store is frequently by travelers passing through the towns, as the store is located near the train depot. While no specific tragedies are credited for the hauntings, current townsfolk say that restless traveling spirits can still be seen walking into the store, and the owner of the property claims to have captured many of the strange sightings on her security cameras. The next one is another place I have been to. This was one of the probably best investigations that I did. Located in Radford is St. Albans Sanatorium. Sanatoriums were notoriously cruel in the early 20th century, using methods like electroshock therapy, lobotomies, and other practices on the patients. The trials had no positive effect for the patients, who acted as test subjects for the doctors curious to see the results of such savage experiments without practicing on the general public. St. Albans Sanatorium is one of these facilities, and the tortured patients did not always survive the test. Additionally, the property was the site of an extremely violent Civil War battle, and visitors report hearing rifles or cannons firing, smelling gun smoke when walking the grounds. It is considered one of the most haunted places in Virginia. St. Albans, another place we went to. That was an epic night. We got activity all throughout that place, but I will say probably the most active spot was in the basement in the bowling alley. That had to be the most active spot, I would say. We got great activity in the boiler room. The dragon room was pretty active too, to say the least. After Rob being completely flipped out of his chair. But yeah, by far the bowling alley was probably the most active. The next one is Colonial Williamsburg. As an early American settlement, numerous historic houses in Colonial Williamsburg are believed to be haunted by past residents. One such property is the Peyton Randolph House, which housed the Peachy family, who rented the property to many guests during their residency, including a young unnamed soldier attending the nearby college, William and Mary. Unfortunately, the young man fell ill during his stay and never recovered. He later died in the home, and today there have been multiple accounts on visitors spotting this young man walking sadly through the house or hearing heavy footsteps above their heads, even though no one is upstairs. The next one is the Ferry Plantation House located in Virginia Beach. The constructed grounds on which the Ferry Plantation House resides date back to 1642, when the second ferry service in Hampton Roads began carrying passengers across the Lynnhaven River to plantations in the county courthouse along the waterway. After the ferry closed, several buildings were erected in succession, only to be torn down or destroyed. Eventually, the last buildings fell into disrepair and were all but forgotten by the living, but the previous residents are said to have never truly left the grounds. 11 spirits have been reported to haunt this house, including the victims of a shipwreck that occurred in 1810. After the city completed extensive renovations, the house was then added to the Virginia Landmarks Register and now serves as a museum. The next one is the Captain Timothy Hill House. Built around 1800, the Captain Timothy Hill House has been dated as the oldest house still standing on the island. The house avoided certain demolition in 1980s when new owners moved it from the original location, but the home's mysterious past can still be felt by visitors. The home originally sat right by the water, where a young family member or neighbor carved likenesses of the passing trade ships on the rough wood exterior of the building. This early graffiti is still visible today, but what led to the haunted history began with Captain Timothy Hill and his daughter Jenny. Captain Hill favored Jenny above his other children and wished to marry her to a wealthy, well-educated man. However, a young man named Tom Freeman, who grew up with the family, was in love with young Jenny. When the captain refused to allow the marriage, Tom became desperate and ambushed her and her mother in a field. Although the details are unclear, Tom ended up shooting Jenny and her mother. While the mother survived, Jenny died from her wound and Tom took his own life in despair. It is believed that Jenny still hangs around the house, pinning for the promising future so suddenly taken from her. Hey, what's going on? Good to see you. Alright, we're going to move on to the next topic, which we're going to talk about the most haunted schools and their ghost stories. Number 1 is the University of New Hampshire. It's the unknown that seems to be the scariest element of hauntings. What has plagued a soul so much that it's trapped in purgatory or a constant quantum loop. According to the dorm students living in Smith Hall and T Hall, report a female spirit haunts the halls at night. Her manifestation as a lady in white has been seen numerous times throughout the halls. The students reported hearing footsteps followed by that eerie "I'm not alone" feeling. Number 2 is the University of New Mexico. An unfortunate freak accident theater, an independent University of New Mexico student newspaper, a 12-year-old boy was killed in a hot water tank explosion. A student employee claims to hear the sound of keys jingling and random door openings when no one else was present in the theater. Given the name the Spot Booth Ghost, theater students honor him today with gifts via a shrine. The shrine includes a place for cast members to leave him notes. Gifts to the young ghost include donuts and toys. Number 3 is the University of Montevallo in Alabama. In 1908, Condi Cunningham was making hot chocolate when she accidentally set her nightgown on fire. She later died from this incident and reportedly haunts the residence hall where this unfortunate event occurred. Students in the main hall claim to see the ghost covered in flames running through the hallway late at night. Creepy. Number 4 is the DePaul University in Greencastle, Indiana. Legend has it that a worker died in the elevator shaft during construction of the Pulliam Center for Contemporary Media. Immediately after the elevator was finished, it began to move from the first floor to the basement while no one was inside. The door to the elevator has been reported to open at night, although no one is present to press any buttons. Strange noises have also been heard coming from or near this elevator. Number 5 is the Wichita State University. Established in 1904, the oldest building on campus, Fesque Hall, served as an infirmary during the 1918 influenza epidemic. Not shocking, this grim history has attracted the interest of many ghost hunters. Ghost hunters claim their EMF readers go crazy in the building. EMFs are a must-have tool to help locate spirits. Needless to say, I got 3 of them. Can y'all hear me now? Y'all can hear me now. Please put something in the chat, please. Alright, we got audio back. Thank God. I don't know what happened there. That was wild. All of a sudden the mic just cut out. Weird. Alright, let's try this again. That was weird. Microphone literally just cut out on me. That was very weird. Alright. Well, I'm sorry about that, guys. But it's alright. We're back now. We'll keep going where we left off. I don't know if y'all heard the last one or not. I really don't know. But if not, I'm going to go ahead and redo it just in case. But number 5 is a Wichita State University. Established in 1904, the oldest building on campus, Fiske Hall, served as an infirmary during the 1918 influenza epidemic. Not shocking, this grim history has attracted the interest of many ghost hunters. According to Travel Channel, ghost hunters claim their electromagnetic field detectors, EMF readers, go off in the building. So I have 3 of them. Number 6 is the Ohio University in Athens, Ohio. One of the oldest universities in America, founded in 1804, a section of the campus is home to the Ridges. Located here is a collection of cemeteries and is now home to Wilson Hall. Prior to the dormitory, university grounds housed a progressive mental hospital, Athens Lunatic Asylum. Considered a spirit hotspot, paranormal researchers like to visit the Ridges Cemetery. This is also where the deceased asylum patients were buried. Number 7 is at Gettysburg College in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. The Gettysburg College campus is located close to the site of the deadly 1863 Battle of Gettysburg, where more than 50,000 soldiers died. In the early 2000s, when students and administrators visited the basement of Penn Hall, they found themselves smack dab in the middle of a functioning Civil War operating room. Witnesses were face to face with bloody doctor and nurse apparitions in the horrific scene of injured patients. Upon returning to the room of the ghastly sight, they were shocked to discover it had disappeared as if it never occurred. The basement did in fact serve as a soldier morgue in 1863. And that's all of them on that one. Alright, the next one we're going to talk about is the haunted history of the most haunted cemeteries in Savannah, Georgia. The first one is the Colonial Park Cemetery, considered one of the most haunted places in the city. The Colonial Park Cemetery is the oldest burial ground in Savannah and is located within the heart of Savannah's historic district. Burials began here in 1750, making it the final resting place of many of Savannah's earliest residents. The numerous ghosts and apparitions mysterious sounds and sights are believed to be caused by the tragic deaths of the thousands of victims of the yellow fever epidemic and the many dueling deaths that were too numerous to count. Whatever the cause, it is not disputed that this historic cemetery has its fair share of eerie events. There's one ghost that seems to be more visible than the others. A man who was convicted of murder, and the story goes he was hung inside the cemetery from a tree. Many who visit say they have seen Reen Radoyer hanging from that same tree. Others say they saw him walking amongst the graves. The story of Reen's ghost has been repeated so many times that some call the cemetery Reen's playground. The other sightings and mysterious encounters include voices, shadowy figures, and more. The next one is the Bonaventure Cemetery. Located along the Wilmington River, Bonaventure Cemetery is known for its gorgeous magnolia, dogwood, and live oaks, colorful azaleas, and interesting tombstones. This beautiful setting has made the more than 150-year-old burial ground one of the most photographed cemeteries in the country. Made famous for its role on the cover of the bestseller Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil. But among the natural beauty, there's a supernatural side to the cemetery that draws in many ghost hunters from all over the world. The most well-known spirit is that of little Gracie Watson, who died of pneumonia at 6 years old. A statue that was carved in her honor stands in front of her grave site, and many people place coins and toys at the base of the statue. Those who stood close to her gravesite have reported seeing the beautiful little girl, and others have said they saw tears of blood streaming down from the angel's eyes. Bonaventure has several other elaborate statues, and guests have told accounts of them grimacing and smiling at them when they stood in front of them. The cemetery is not without its spooky or inexplicable sounds like that of a baby crying near an infant's grave, giggling children, or perhaps the most disturbing, which is the sounds of a pack of dogs snarling and barking very angrily. No one has ever seen the dogs, but many have heard them. The next one is the Laurel Grove Cemetery. Established in 1853, this ancient cemetery was created after Colonial Park became too full for any more burials. A segregated burial ground on the north side was reserved for the whites, the south for blacks. Among the famous laid to rest here are Girl Scouts founder Juliette Gordon Low, 24 different Savannah mayors, a U.S. Supreme Court justice, and as well as more than 1,500 Confederate soldiers that was killed in the war. A walkthrough of Laurel Grove will remind you just how separate life was back in the Civil War era and even beyond. In fact, there are two separate entrances, and the distinction between elaborately carved figures and headstones and simple grave markers is quite evident. But it is the hauntings that lure in visitors, instances that include the sightings of a woman dressed in a wedding gown wandering about, and the sounds of heavy footsteps when no one was in sight. There's also the ghost story that dates back all the way to 1894, when a trolley line that traveled past the cemetery reported that every time the railway car passed the cemetery, they would hear the sound of a child crying. The crying continued for many years, every day, and only in car number 28. The workers on board reported that although the sounds were pitiful and spooky, after a while they got used to it. No one ever saw a child inside the car. Alright. The next topic we're going to be talking about is the top 32 most haunted places in America. Starting off with number 1 is Bodie, California. Once home to 10,000 people, Bodie boomed in the 1870s and 80s when gold was found in the hills surrounding Mono Lake. It's now a state historic park, with some parts of the town preserved in a state of arrested decay, tables with place settings and shops eerily stocked with supplies. It's not surprising that there are many reports of supernatural activity, including ghost sightings and music playing from shuttered bars. There's also a legend that any visitor who takes anything, even a rock from Bodie, will be cursed with bad luck and health problems upon leaving. The next one we just talked about, the Bonaventure Cemetery in Savannah, Georgia. Those of you who remember the 1990s will recognize the cemetery as one of the featured in the novel Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil. The Savannah Cemetery itself has a Southern Gothic atmosphere with Spanish moss giving shade to time-worn Victorian monuments. There are many notable figures buried here, like singer Johnny Mercer and poet Conrad Aiken. But it's Gracie Watson who most deserves a visit. Having died at just 6 years old from pneumonia, her grave is marked by a life-size marble statue with her hand resting on a tree stump, symbolizing her life that was cut short. Many visitors place toys at her grave when they visit, and some have reported seeing the ghost of Gracie near the site. Other spooky accounts of the Bonaventure Cemetery include inexplicable sounds like crying babies and barking dogs, and statues suddenly smiling at people as they approach. The next one is Chawaba, Alabama. Alabama's first capital and famous ghost town takes its name from the state's longest river, situated at the confluence of the Chawaba and the Alabama. It was abandoned after the Civil War, and its empty buildings, slave burial ground, and eerie cemeteries are now popular settings for ghost tours and stories of paranormal activity. The most famous tale is that of a luminous floating orb appearing in the former garden maze of Colonel C.C. Paguayas. Shortly after the colonel had been killed in battle, the phenomenon became known as the Paguayas ghost and still attracts curious visitors to the site today. The next one is the I'm going to try to pronounce this as best I can. Cal Castillo Courthouse in Lake Charles, Louisiana. Tony Jo Henry was a former worker who reached national levels of infamy when she killed a man in cold blood in 1940. It took 3 trials for a jury to convict the charming Tony Jo, but she eventually became the first and only woman in Louisiana to be executed by the electric chair. However, her spirit is said to have remained in the courthouse, where workers can feel her presence and even smell her burning hair. Many claim she meddles with everyday life at the courthouse to make life more difficult for the employees, locking doors and fiddling with the office equipment. The next one is the Crescent Hotel in Eureka Springs, Arkansas. Since its construction in 1886, the Crescent Hotel has served several purposes: a luxury resort, conservatory for younger women, junior college, but the strangest mark on its history came in 1937 when it got a new owner, Norman G. Baker, who was a millionaire inventor who decided to pose as a doctor and turn the hotel into a hospital that could supposedly cure cancer. He was eventually found out and run out of the town, although reports say that his spirit found its way back to the site. and found some otherworldly company too. The now operating Crescent Hotel is said to be haunted by at least 8 different spirits, ranging from a 5-year-old girl to a bearded man wearing Victorian clothing. The next one is the Dock Street Theater in Charleston, South Carolina. One of the oldest theaters in America, this site in downtown Charleston has racked up a lot of turmoil and history over the years. After a fire burned down the original theater, the Planters Inn was built on the spot. It was converted back to a theater in the 1930s. The most flamboyant ghost here is Nettie Dickerson, who legend has it was struck by lightning while standing on the balcony of the hotel. Her shadow has been reported gliding along the second floor of the theater dressed in a red gown. Also in attendance, Junius Brutus Booth, a renowned 19th century actor and the father of Lincoln assassin John Wilkes Booth, who used to frequent the inn. The next one is the Driscoll Hotel in Austin, Texas. The Driscoll is a majestic Romanesque hotel with modern rooms and an iconic brick facade, drawing European tourists and wedding parties since 1886. It's a true Austin landmark and, according to some, a true hotspot for ghosts. Travelers have noted eerie, abnormal sounds through its ornate corridors, as well as phantom sightings of the hotel's namesake. Jesse Driscoll, whose portrait still hangs in the lobby, they say Driscoll never recovered from the heartbreak of losing his hotel in a high-stakes poker game. Alright, the next one is the Eastern State Penitentiary in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. The castle-like Eastern State Penitentiary took solitary confinement to new levels when it was built in 1829. Prisoners lived alone, exercised alone, and ate alone. When an inmate left his cell, a guard would cover his head with a hood so he couldn't see or be seen. The prison had to abandon its solitary system due to overcrowding from 1913 until its closing in 1970. Although the forms of punishment did not get any less severe, chaining an inmate's tongue to his wrist is one punishment. The site, one of the most haunted places in America, now welcomes thousands of visitors every year, both for its museum and annual Terror Behind the Wall celebrations. And if you didn't know, Eastern State Penitentiary is where Al Capone was housed. The next one is Emily's Bridge in Stowe, Vermont. New England is known for its lovely covered bridges, but some are more likely to elect dread rather than delight. Take Emily's Bridge in Stowe, for example, a 50-foot long bridge that is said to be the site of a young woman's suicide in the mid-1800s. According to legend, a woman named Emily was supposed to meet her lover at the bridge, but ended up hanging herself from the rafters when he never showed up. Today, Emily's ghost is said to maliciously haunt the site, clawing at passing cars and even scratching the backs of pedestrians until they bleed. They are slightly less menacing spooks, as well as like the image of a white apparition and strange voices and footsteps coming from the bridge. The next one is the Gettysburg Battlefield. The Battle of Gettysburg was one of the bloodiest in American history, with somewhere around 50,000 young men dying in the 3-day conflict. Many of the soldiers never received a proper burial after their untimely deaths, and many believe the souls of these men now wander the field to look for their weapons and comrades. The next one is the Honolulu International Airport. The resident ghost, dubbed the Lady in Waiting. The apparition is a blonde woman in a white dress who shows up in off-limit areas of the airport. According to legend, the woman fell in love with a man who promised to marry her while she was still alive, but then he hopped on an international flight and abandoned her at the gate. Story has it her ghost is still waiting for him to return. People have reported other strange occurrences as well, like toilet paper rolls that unravel on their own and toilets that flush by themselves. The next one is the Hotel Monte Vista in Flagstaff, Arizona. The Flagstaff Hotel Monte Vista has its fair share of paranormal guests who have truly overstayed their welcome, including a long-time boarder who had the habit of hanging raw meat from the chandelier in room 210, and two women who were thrown from the third floor and now attempt to kill male guests in their sleep. There's also reportedly an infant whose disturbing cries have sent staff members running upstairs from the basement. Actor John Wayne even had a paranormal occurrence here at the hotel. The next one is the House of the Seven Gables in Salem, Massachusetts. Aside from being the site of the famous witch trial, Salem also happens to be the birthplace of Nathaniel Hawthorne, who used the 17th century house as inspiration for his famous 1851 novel, The House of the Seven Gables. Aside from its beautiful yet spooky facade, the house is surrounded by tales of paranormal activity and ghost sightings. Alright, the next one is the Lincoln Park Zoo in Chicago, Illinois. As it turns out, one of the Chicago's most popular attractions is also one of the most haunted, with much more than just chimpanzees roaming the grounds. From the 1840s to 50s, the heart of Lincoln Park served as the city's cemetery, housing over 35,000 bodies. The cemetery was eventually moved to its proximity to the city's water supply, and most of the bodies, but not all of them, were moved along with it. As if walking above several thousand corpses isn't creepy enough, famed parapsychologist Ursula Bileski once called the area without a doubt the most active site I've investigated, and people have reported seeing ghosts there since it opened 150 years ago. The next one is one of the more famous ones, located in Fall River, Massachusetts. It's the Lizzie Borden House Bed and Breakfast. Without a doubt, the most famous haunted bed and breakfast in New England is the Lizzie Borden House in Fall River, Massachusetts. For those unfamiliar with the story, police accused Borden of brutally killing her father and stepmother with a hatchet in 1892. She was acquitted of the murders later that year. But at the house, visitors can tour the house or even stay the night, staying in the room where Abby Borden was killed. Guests and employees have reported all kinds of strange activity in the house, including weeping and footstep sounds, an apparition of Victorian-era clothing wandering the halls, doors opening, closing, and multiple conversations coming from vacant rooms. Yes, for sure, I definitely want to go myself. That's going to be a trip in the next couple years. Go stay overnight at the Lizzie Borden house. The next one is the Mark Twain house in Hartford, Connecticut. Mark Twain lived in his Hartford house from 1874 to 1891, during which time he wrote both The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn and The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. The landmark now serves as a museum that showcases the iconic author's life and work. It's also an excellent place to experience the paranormal. Apparently, his visitors have reported things like odd noises and a woman in white. The billiard room is considered the most haunted spot in the house. It is where Twain used to sit and smoke cigars, and some claim they can even smell the smoke wafting through the air as they pass through. The next one is a Masonic temple in Detroit, Michigan. With its 16 floors and 1,000+ rooms and Gothic facade, the Masonic temple is one of the most imposing additions to the Detroit skyline. According to rumors, there's also more to it than what meets the eye, like hidden passageways and staircases. The most famous urban myth associated with the temple is that of its architect George D. Mason. Legend has it that Mason went bankrupt funding the construction and then leaped to his death from the roof. You'll be hard-pressed to find the facts to back up this tale, but it certainly does help explain reports of a ghost climbing the steps to the roof of the building. The next one is the Mizpah Hotel in Tonopah, Nevada. Another place I'd like to go. The Mizpah Hotel in 1907 opened as one of Nevada's first luxury hotels. Complete with solid granite walls and Victorian-era decor, it was fully restored in 2011. But the swanky hotel has a very gruel history, as blood red as its scarlet furnishings, one it proudly embraces. Legend has it that a woman died on the 5th floor and her soul never left the building. The lady in red now reportedly makes her presence known by whispering in men's ears and leaving pearls from her broken necklace on the guests' pillows. The Mizpah honors her reputation by letting visitors stay in the Lady in Red suite and serving the Red Lady Bloody Mary at the hotel, restaurant, and bar. The next one is the Myrtles Plantation in St. Francisville, Louisiana. Built in 1796 by General David Bradford, Myrtles Plantation is considered to be one of America's most haunted sites. The house is rumored to be on top of an Indian burial ground and is home to at least 12 different spirits. Legends and ghost stories abound, including the tale of a former slave named Chloe, who had her ear chopped off after she was reportedly caught eavesdropping. She got her revenge by poisoning a birthday cake and killing 2 of the plantation owner's daughters, but was then hung by her fellow slaves. Chloe now reportedly wanders around the plantation wearing a turban to conceal her severed ear. The next one is the Ohio State Reformatory in Mansfield, Ohio. Opened in 1896, the Ohio State Reformatory is famous for its Gothic facade and ominous 6-story cell block. But its greatest claim to fame is when it served as the filming location for the Shaw's Bank Redemption. Through the prison was shrouded in terror long before Red and Andy holed up there. The reformatory closed in 1990 due to overcrowding and inhumane conditions, but not before more than 200 people, including 2 guards, died in the building. Legend says that the ghosts of several former inmates still roam the halls, as well as an old guard who jabs people with his nightstick. Okay. The next one is One If by Land, Two If by Sea in New York City. One of the world's most romantic restaurants, One If by Land, Two If by Sea, has all the makings of a perfect evening: gold chandeliers, fireside tables, upper crust cuisine, and even about 20 different spirits. The spirits are reportedly more playful than malicious. paranormal activities are classic phantom pranks like flickering lights, tilting picture frames, and moving plates and chairs. Some of the most famous apparitions include a woman dressed in black who walks down the staircase as Ziegfeld Follies girl. Other people claim that Aaron Burr haunts the restaurant. It was his carriage house back in the day. After all, sadly, there are no reports of him performing any songs from the soundtracks. The next one is the Pine Barrens Forest in New Jersey. This one is wild. The heavily forested Pine Barrens spans over 1 million acres in 7 counties in New Jersey. The area thrived during the colonial period, host to sawmills, paper mills, and other business industries. People eventually abandoned the mills and surrounding villages when coal was discovered to the west in Pennsylvania, leaving behind ghost towns. Some say a few supernatural wonders. The most popular Pine Barrens resident is without a doubt the Jersey Devil. According to legend, the creature was born in 1735 to Deborah Leeds, her 13th child, with leathery wings, a goat's head, and hooves. It flew up the Leeds chimney and into the barns where it has reportedly been killing livestock and creeping out South Jersey residents ever since. Another place I'd like to go. I'm going to go find the Jersey Devil. The next one is a Pittock Mansion in Portland, Oregon. Pioneers Henry and Georgiana Pittock decided to build the dream house when they reached their golden years. In 1909, spurring the innovative design and construction of the mansion, unfortunately, the couple only got to enjoy their home for a few years before passing away. The building is now a public landmark where some strange occurrences have been reported, such as the smell of roses filling a room with no flowers in it, a childhood painting of Henry moving on its own from spot to spot within the house. The next one is in Skagway, Alaska. It is the Red Onion Saloon. Established in 1898 as a brothel for miners during the Klondike Gold Rush, Alaska's Red Onion Saloon had a feature that set it apart from other bordellos. It used dolls to help run its business. Every day, 10 dolls would be placed on the bar downstairs, each one representing one of the ladies working in the upstairs rooms. A customer would choose one of the dolls, at which point it was laid down on the bar to indicate that particular worker was occupied. When the customer came back downstairs, the doll would be returned to her sitting position to let other potential clients know that she was available. But in 2019, when the Red Onion Saloon still operates as a bar and restaurant and offers tours of the upstairs room, which are preserved as a sort of makeshift museum, as if the dolls weren't creepy enough, there were reports of Lydia, a former madam of the brothel, haunting the site, complete with cold spots and lingering smells of perfume wafting through the halls. The next one is the RMS Queen Mary in Long Beach, California. Aside from a brief stint as a warship in World War II, the RMS Queen Mary served as a luxury ocean liner from 1836 to 1867. During that time, it was the site of at least one murder, a sailor being crushed to death by a door in the engine room, and children drowning in the pool. The city of Long Beach purchased the ship in 1967 and turned it into a hotel, which still serves that purpose today. Although the reported ghosts of the deceased passengers get to stay for free, For an extra dose of spine-tingling experiences, you can visit the ship's engine room, which is considered to be a hot spot of paranormal activity. We still got quite a few more on this list, and then we'll move to the next topic. The next one is the San Fernando Cathedral in San Antonio, Texas. The oldest church in Texas holds El Meraki Mass on Sunday, and it is a stunning example of Gothic revival architecture. But come nightfall, you'd have to be something of a daredevil to enter its myth-ridden grounds. When construction workers started renovating the church in 1936, they unearthed bones, nails, and tattered military uniforms, which some believe belonged to 3 soldiers of the Alamo. Since the disturbing incident, visitors have reported shadowy figures and orbs in the photographs, as well as ghosts in the back of the church itself. Such otherworldly inhabitants include a man dressed in black and figures in hooded, monk-like clothing. The next one is the Sheffield Island Lighthouse in Norwalk, Connecticut. Built in 1868 to help ships reach Connecticut's Sheffield Island, a 45-minute ferry ride from South Norwalk, this 10-room Victorian-style lighthouse has a bit of a troubled past. In 1972, the lighthouse's original keeper died suddenly while watching passing ships with a spyglass. His death has never fully been explained. Then in 1991, an archaeologist working on the historic site preservation reported several mysterious happenings, including mystical music coming from the shores, distant cries for help, and the sound of a foghorn despite there being no foghorn on the island. Many believe that the sounds were the work of the ghost of Captain Robert Sheffield, who originally purchased the islands in the early 1800s. The next one is the Stanley Hotel in Estes Park, Colorado. The Stanley Hotel's stately architecture and world-renowned whiskey bar have lured travelers to Estes Park since the hotel opened in 1909. But the Stanley reached new levels of fame after inspiring Stephen King's fictional Overlook Hotel from The Shining. That eerie association aside, many other ghost sightings and mysterious piano music have been connected to the hotel. The Stanley Hotel leans into its reputation quite cleverly, offering nightly ghost tours and psychic consultations from the in-house psychic. The next one is the St. Augustine Lighthouse in Florida. The St. Augustine Lighthouse is visited by nearly 225,000 people annually, but it is just as well known for its otherworldly visitors. Several tragic events occurred at the now historic site that have contributed to the alleged paranormal activity. One of the first was when the lighthouse keeper fell to his death while painting the tower. His ghost has since been spotted watching over the grounds. Another event was a horrific death of 3 young girls who drowned when the cart they were playing in broke and fell into the ocean. Today, the visitors claim to hear the sounds of children playing in and around the lighthouse. The next one, located in Weston, West Virginia, is the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum. The Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum opened its doors to patients in 1864. And in the 1950s, the West Virginia facility reached its peak, housing more than 2,400 patients. even though it was designed to hold only 250. The severe overcrowding led to inhumane conditions like lack of heat and convalescents kept in cages, and patients starting acting increasingly violent, from starting fires to attacking staff members. The asylum closed in 1994, but the souls of some patients are said to linger. Ghost tours are available. Definitely one place I'd like to go to. The next one is the Whaley House in San Diego, California. Thomas Whaley built his family estate in 1857 in San Diego on the former site of the city's first public gallows. Shortly after he moved in, he reported hearing the heavy footsteps of Yankee Jim Robinson, a drifter and thief who was hanged on the site 4 years before the house was built. Whaley's family history ended up being filled with tragic deaths and suicides, many of which occurred inside the home itself. Some of the family members reportedly still haunt the landmark, often accompanied by cigar smoke and the smell of heavy perfume. Right. The next one and final one for this list is the Winchester Mystery House in San Jose, California. The Winchester Mystery House might be one of the most disturbing construction projects in history. Following the death of her husband and child, Sarah Winchester, the wife of a rifle maker's son, was informed by her seer that her family was killed by the ghosts of gunshot victims. To keep away the vengeful spirits, she commissioned the Victorian funhouse turned macabre dwelling that you see today. Some of the creepier features include staircases that led directly into the ceiling, doors that open onto brick walls, or windows that can take you to secret passages. And that's the top 32 haunted places of America. Now we're going to jump in to the haunted history of the St. Roch Cemetery in New Orleans. St. Roch Cemetery was founded by Reverend P.L. Thevis in 1874 during one of New Orleans' yellow fever outbreaks. The patron saint of protection from epidemics, St. Roch was prayed to and was asked to protect the people of New Orleans during this epidemic. When nobody from the Reverend's church died of yellow fever, they founded the cemetery as part of his promise to St. Roch. He promised that if St. Roch would keep his people safe, he would build a chapel to St. Roch. This chapel is now inside of the St. Roch Cemetery. Today, the St. Roch Cemetery is one of the least visited large cemeteries in New Orleans. Any given day, you can go there and find yourself there by yourself. Maybe this is why there are a number of ghost stories associated with the cemetery. Ghosts seem to prefer to be left alone, and that's why the St. Roch Cemetery is a great place to go to be by yourself. One of the most famous ghost stories associated with the St. Roch Cemetery is that of a ghost dog, which is often seen wandering through the cemetery. However, on our New Orleans ghost tours, we don't get the chance. That's just talking about that. But the ghost dog of the St. Roch Cemetery is described as an unnaturally large black dog. It has been captured in many pictures and videos. Supposedly, I have personally not seen any of the photographs or videos of the ghost. Be cool to see one though. I've seen ghost cats, but I ain't seen a ghost dog. The saint which the cemetery is named after, St. Roch, was a patron saint of dogs. Interesting. Another famed ghost story is that of a hooded figure that is seen walking through the cemetery. Imagine being a visitor to the St. Roch Cemetery. You're just walking around, minding your own business, checking out the tombs and the vaults which fill the cemetery. All of a sudden, you see a man dressed in a black robe, his hood pulled over, covering his head. Then you pay attention. Then, just as quickly as you notice him, he walks through a wall or simply vanishes into thin air. If this hooded ghost has even been seen walking through the cemetery after the gates are locked. Nobody can get in or out, but the ghost still wanders the pathways of the cemetery. No one knows whose ghost this is, but based on his clothing, he was involved with the church. If you're ever in St. Roch Cemetery and see a man in a black robe wandering around, follow him. Okay, that's the haunted history of the St. Roch Cemetery. Now we're gonna get into the final topic of tonight, and it's a good one. The haunted history of the Central State Hospital in Petersburg, Virginia. The story starts after the Civil War at the Howard Grove Freeman Hospital, created out of a former Confederate hospital in 1868. In the present day, this would be in the Fairmount Historic District on Fairmount Avenue. Originally, this hospital was going to treat a wide array of illnesses as a general practice. However, in 1870, the Commonwealth of Virginia bought the property and began making it a place for colored persons with unsound minds. They took in patients from the Eastern Lunatic Asylum in Williamsburg and picked up African Americans who had been jailed for lunacy across the state. In 1882, a 300-acre farm called the Mayfield Farm in Dinwiddie County was purchased and upgraded to open as the new Central Lunatic Asylum. Over 400 patients were transferred from Howard Grove to the new asylum, with over 100 other people on a wait list for the space. The asylum was the only one to cater exclusively to African Americans in the entire state. In 1894, legislation was created to change the image of these hospitals so the Central Lunatic Asylum became Central State Hospital. Politicians hoped the name change would evoke positive feelings towards both the patients and the medical staff at the facilities. During the early part of the 1900s, women were accepted, which prompted the creation of a new building for them. After the Civil Rights Movement in 1967, it started to accept all races and nationalities. By the time of the 1950s, the hospital has reached its maximum capacity with over 4,800 patients. There were over 80 buildings on the campus, and another 200 acres had been bought. So Central State Hospital was essentially a small city at this point. Places including a chapel, training buildings, dorms for staff, a carpenter's workshop, a pipe shop, and an amphitheater with projection booths, a kitchen, and laundry facilities. A huge scandal was revealed in 1980. Over 1,700 patients were forcefully sterilized, and it was revealed that altogether 77,205 people in the course of the hospital's history had been sterilized from 1924 to 1973. 4 people managed to bring a lawsuit against the state of Virginia with the help of the American Civil Liberties Union. They won, which meant the state had to both notify people of their sterilizations and flip the tab for reversible operations. Nowadays, the place is barely a shadow of its former glory. All the buildings are outdated and crumbling. There's barely any staff because no one wants to work at a subpar, dangerous facility. It houses the criminals with a history of psychosis, and a maximum security wing. New patients are out in about 30 days. A new Central State Hospital is going to be built over the course of the next 5 years. Nobody knows what's going to happen to the structures currently standing. They may be sold, demolished, or simply abandoned. While the buildings may be forgotten, there is work being done to make sure the history of the patients is not forgotten. King Davis found himself with a life-changing opportunity in 2009 as a former behavioral health commissioner in Virginia. He was made aware of that the Central State was about to destroy over a century's worth of patient records to save space. Using his power as the current director of the Institute for Urban Policy Research and Analysis at the University of Texas, he made a plan to save the records for digitization. These records were a gold mine of information. Every person with a mental illness from 1885 to 1970 has gone to Central State. They showed the everyday workings of the hospital, treatments, everything. It's a daunting collection. However, there are over 800,000 documents, thousands of pictures, and 1 million index cards with patient information. Back in 1848, slaves could be placed in a lunatic asylum with a medical ailment called drapetomania. This illness was peddled by a Samuel A. Cartwright, explaining that slaves who ran away were mentally ill, and the problem could be prevented by treating them like children, with physical beatings if necessary. If a master tried too hard to treat slaves like people, they were going against the natural order of things, and the slaves would retaliate by running away. While the practice was mocked up north, it did have some hold south of the Mason-Dixon line. This would go far in explaining why there would seem to be an explosion of serious mental illnesses diagnosed in the African American communities. Illnesses like, I'm not going to say that, because I know I can't pronounce that word. Bipolar mania were more so attributed to former slaves and freedmen. Over 70% of Virginia's asylum population had these severe illnesses. But once the slaves were freed after the Emancipation Proclamation, suddenly they were getting diagnosed with all these severe disorders that would land them in these new state hospitals. Hospitals run by former Confederate white slave owners who believed hard work would cure their patients, along with physical restraint and assault. These former slaves were technically free, but now found themselves working on the farmland that provided the food for the hospital or in housekeeping. While there are not any named ghosts, there are plenty of stories from patients and staff about objects moving, flickering lights, shadow people running around the campus. There are even stories from police officers who have seen and heard things. Moans, wails, screams, and cries are said to echo around the crumbling buildings in the dead of the night. Plants like ivy and trees grow up and through the abandoned buildings. It's a creepy sight to behold. There is a cemetery on the campus filled with nameless graves. Yeah, right. And that's the haunted history of the Central State Hospital in Petersburg, Virginia. And that is the final topic for the podcast tonight. I hope you guys enjoyed. It was a little bit of a longer podcast, and I'm truly sorry about the whole mic situation. I still can't see how that cut out, but I got it back. We continued on, but I hope you guys enjoyed. And remember, Saturday night, 10 p.m., I'll be doing a live clown doll investigation right here on the channel. I hope you guys will check out the channel, enjoy the new name of Restless Souls Paranormal, and enjoy all the content we got coming up for you guys here in the very near future. But I hope you guys